The night was brutal. Winds slashed through the alleyways, carrying scraps of paper across cracked pavement. Ethan Cole pulled his coat tighter, heading home from a double shift at Peterson's auto shop. His hands still smelled of motor oil despite scrubbing them raw. 16 hours of bending over engines had left his back screaming, but the extra pay would cover Lily's after-school program for another month. He cut through the narrow streets of East Bridgeport, a neighborhood where street lights flickered more often than they shone. Not the safest route home, but it shaved 15 minutes off his walk. 15 more minutes he could spend with a Lily before she fell asleep. A gust of wind knifed through his worn jacket. 3 more blocks. Then warmth. Then his daughter's smile. The thought alone generated heat in his chest. His steps froze. Under the sickly yellow glow of a half-broken streetlight, a young woman sat curled against the brick wall of an abandoned laundromat. Not the usual homeless person. No shopping cart. No layers of tattered clothing. Just a girl with a university backpack hugged to her chest, shivering violently in clothes too thin for December in Connecticut. She looked up, and something in her eyes caught him. Intelligence, desperation, and something else. A quiet dignity at odds with her circumstances. Those eyes widened with sudden fear when they met his. "Are you one of them?" Her voice cracked, raw from cold or crying or both. She scrambled backward, clutching her backpack tighter. "Did they send you to find me?" Ethan raised his hand slowly. "I don't know who they are. I'm just walking home from work." The girl studied him, calculation replacing fear. Her gaze swept over his oil-stained work shirt. The logo of Peterson's auto faded from too many washes. "I've been running for weeks," she whispered, then caught herself. "I mean, forget I said that. Just please go away." Ethan should have walked on. That's what everyone in East Bridgeport did. Mind your business. Keep moving. But 3 years ago, when his car broke down during a blizzard with baby Lily in the back seat, a stranger had stopped to help. Some debts couldn't be repaid to those who were owed. They could only be paid forward. "You're freezing." He unzipped his jacket. The warmth he'd accumulated during his walk immediately sucked away by the wind. "Take this, please." She stared at the offered coat. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." The question hit him like a physical blow. In the years since Maria's death, he'd built walls around himself and Lily, focused only on survival. When had kindness become so rare it inspired suspicion? "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing." The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere he'd forgotten existed. "And I'll never forget it." Her lips trembled, not from cold this time. "Nobody helps without wanting something." "Not tonight." He draped the coat over her shoulders, decision made. "I've got a couch and some hot soup. One night, no questions." She hesitated, glancing down the dark street. Whatever she was running from, tonight it seemed the cold was the more immediate threat. She nodded once, sharply, and rose to her feet with unexpected grace. "Sophie," she said, pulling his coat tighter around her thin frame. "My name is Sophie Hart." The walk to his apartment was tense, silent. Ethan messaged Mrs. Greenberg next door, a military widow who watched Lily when his shifts ran late. Sophie followed 3 steps behind, scanning every shadow, every doorway. Ready to bolt. His building was a converted textile factory, all exposed brick and pipes, divided into small units that rented cheap due to the neighborhood and the constant rattle of the heating system. The elevator had been temporarily out of service since he'd moved in 2 years ago. "5th floor," he said apologetically. By the 3rd flight, Sophie was breathing hard, confirmation of how long she'd gone without proper food. On the landing, she swayed slightly. Ethan pretended not to notice. Something told him she was the type to refuse help if it meant admitting weakness. The apartment door stuck in the frame, swollen from the winter humidity. Ethan shouldered it open with practiced ease. Inside, lamplight cast a warm glow over worn furniture. The space was small, a living room that flowed into a kitchen, barely big enough for a 2-person table, a short hallway leading to 2 doors, his bedroom and Lily's. Mrs. Greenberg sat on the couch, her knitting needles clicking steadily. She looked up, eyes widening fractionally at the sight of Sophie before settling into understanding. "She was an angel, as always," she said, gathering her things. "Fell asleep reading that dinosaur book again." Ethan nodded gratefully. "Thanks for staying late." Mrs. Greenberg patted his cheek as she passed. To Sophie, she simply said, "There's extra blankets in the hall closet, dear." The door closed behind her with a soft click. Sophie stood rooted in place, eyes traveling over the small apartment. They lingered on the photographs crowding the wall, Ethan and a smiling dark-haired woman holding a newborn, the woman thinner in each successive picture until she disappeared entirely from the timeline, leaving just Ethan and a growing Lily. "Your wife?" Ethan nodded once, throat tight. "Cancer. 3 years ago." Something unreadable flickered across Sophie's face. "I'm sorry." Before he could respond, a small voice called from the hallway. "Daddy?" Lily stood in her doorway, sleep-rumpled in unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. At 8, she was all knees and elbows, with her mother's dark curls and Ethan's stubborn chin. Her eyes widened at the sight of Sophie. "Who's she?" Ethan moved to his daughter, crouching to her level. "This is Sophie. She needs a place to stay tonight. It's very cold outside." Lily considered this with the gravity only children can muster. Then she disappeared into her room, returning seconds later with a battered stuffed bear, its fur worn smooth from years of love. "You can borrow Mr. Bean's," she said solemnly, holding out the toy. "He keeps the bad dreams away." Sophie's composure cracked. She knelt, accepting the bear with trembling hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the toy like it was made of gold. "That's very kind." That moment sealed it. The kindness of a child, the trust of a father. Something Sophie had clearly never known. That night, after tucking Lily back into bed, Ethan prepared the couch with sheets and blankets. Sophie stood awkwardly in the kitchen, still wearing his coat despite the apartment's warmth. "Bathroom's through there if you want to clean up," he said, gesturing down the hall. "I can loan you some sweatpants and a t-shirt. They'll be big, but they're clean." Sophie hesitated. "Why are you doing this? Would you believe me if I said it was Christmas spirit?" Her lips twisted in a ghost of a smile. "It's December 3rd. Then I'm getting a head start." He placed a stack of clothes on the counter between them. "There's soup warming on the stove. Eat, shower, sleep, in whatever order you want. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "I can't pay you back. Not now, but someday." "This isn't a loan," Ethan cut her off gently. "It's just what people should do for each other." Later, as he lay in bed listening to the quiet sounds of Sophie moving around his apartment, a shadow crossed his mind. He barely made rent each month. He lived paycheck to paycheck. He couldn't afford to take on more responsibility. Yet when he thought of Sophie, half-starved, trembling under his old blanket, he knew he couldn't turn her away. Not tonight. Maybe not tomorrow either. What he didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would come back to him months later in a way he could never imagine. Morning arrived with the clatter of Lily preparing her own cereal, a skill she'd mastered out of necessity when Ethan worked early shifts. He found Sophie already awake, folding the blankets with hospital corner precision. She'd tied her honey blonde hair back with a rubber band, revealing cheekbones sharp from hunger. "You didn't have to do that," he said, nodding at the neatly made couch. "Small payment for sanctuary." The formal word choice struck him as odd for someone so young. She gestured to the window where snow had begun to fall. "I should go before it gets worse." "Go where?" Her expression shuddered. "I'll figure something out." From the kitchen came the crash of Lily's cereal bowl hitting the floor. Milk and Cheerios spread across the linoleum. Before Ethan could move, Sophie was there, kneeling beside Lily. "Accidents happen," she said, her voice gentler than Ethan had yet heard it. "Let's clean up together." Lily's lower lip trembled. "Daddy says I need to be more careful." "Everyone drops things sometimes, even grown-ups." Sophie demonstrated by deliberately dropping a spoon. "See? No big deal." By the time Ethan joined them, they were giggling together as they wiped up the mess, Sophie making the sponge talk in a squeaky voice. Something in his chest twisted. It had been months since he had heard Lily laugh like that. "You're good with kids," he observed as they walked Lily to the bus stop 30 minutes later. Sophie shrugged, burying her hands in the pockets of his too large coat. "I volunteered at a children's hospital during high school." Before, she trailed off, that guarded look returning. At the bus stop, Lily threw her arms around Sophie's waist. Will you be here when I get home? She asked, face tilted up hopefully. Sophie glanced at Ethan, panic flashing in her eyes. Sophie might need to go take care of some things, he said carefully. But she's welcome to come back. The school bus arrived, saving Sophie from responding. They watched as Lily climbed aboard, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. I shouldn't stay, Sophie said once the bus pulled away. I don't want to impose. Where would you go? Her silence was answer enough. Look, Ethan said, I work at an auto shop. It's warm there. My boss might let you sit in the waiting area for a few hours. Then we can figure out a better plan. Peterson's auto shop occupied a converted gas station on the edge of East Bridgeport. The waiting area consisted of 3 plastic chairs and a coffee machine that produced liquid only technically classifiable as coffee. She can stay if she keeps to herself, Mike Peterson said after Ethan explained the situation, though his eyes narrowed suspiciously at Sophie. But I'm not running a shelter. Thank you, sir, Sophie said with unexpected formality. I won't be any trouble. For the next 8 hours, she sat quietly in the corner chair, knees drawn up, a library book open in her lap. Occasionally, Ethan glanced through the glass partition to find her watching the mechanics work with curious intensity. During his lunch break, he brought her half his sandwich. Not much, but it's something. She accepted it with visible reluctance. I hate being a charity case. It's just a sandwich, not a kidney. That startled a small laugh from her. Fair point. She took a bite, then asked, how did you learn auto repair? Military. Served as a mechanic for 8 years before Lily was born. He nodded toward her book. You in college? A shadow passed over her face. I was. Business major. She changed the subject quickly. Your daughter, she looks like you, around the eyes. Everyone else says she's the spitting image of her mother. Well, I can see that too, but she has your expressions, the way you both furrow your brow when you're thinking. Sophie demonstrated, her forehead creasing in a perfect imitation of his concentrated look. Ethan laughed. Never noticed that. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see the obvious connections. The observation hung between them, oddly profound from someone so young. That evening, they picked Lily up from her after-school program together. The girl's face lit up at the sight of Sophie, her excitement bubbling over as she described every minute detail of her day. Sophie listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Lily glow with importance. Back at the apartment, Sophie insisted on cooking dinner. Basic life skill, she said, chopping vegetables with unexpected precision. Plus, I noticed you have some ingredients that are about to go bad. The meal she prepared was simple, pasta, with vegetables and a sauce made from odds and ends in his refrigerator, but better than anything Ethan had managed in months. After dinner, she helped Lily with her homework, explaining a math problem with such clarity that Lily, who normally hated math, beamed with newfound understanding. I think you explained that better than my teacher, Lily declared. Sophie smiled. Different explanations work for different people. You just needed to see it another way. Later, after Lily went to bed, Sophie approached Ethan hesitantly. I've been thinking about your offer to let me stay. If it's still open, I'd like to accept. Just for a few days, a week at most, until I figure things out. Relief washed through him. The thought of her back on the streets had been gnawing at him all day. The couch is yours for as long as you need it. I want to contribute, she said firmly. I noticed your kitchen cabinet hinge is broken. The bathroom sink drips. I can fix those things. And I can cook, clean, help with Lily. You're not a servant, Sophie. No, I'm a guest who respects herself too much to take without giving back. Her chin lifted slightly. My circumstances don't define me. The weeks rolled by, and Sophie became more than just a stranger on Ethan's couch. She slowly became part of their fragile little world. But nothing about it was simple. At first, Sophie was quiet, guarded. She'd wash dishes without being asked, sweep the floor, even braid Lily's hair in the mornings before school. But there was a heaviness to her smile, like it cost her something every time she tried to show one. Ethan didn't push her. He knew what brokenness looked like. He lived with it every day, in the empty space beside him in bed, in the moments when Lily asked questions about her mother that became harder to answer as memories blurred around the edges. One evening, after another exhausting shift, Ethan came home to find Sophie sitting cross-legged on the floor with Lily. They were drawing on scrap paper, elaborate castles with turrets and drawbridges. Lily's laughter filled the apartment, bouncing off the faded wallpaper. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something lift from his chest. Then he noticed Sophie's hands. She was shading the towers with perfect strokes, precise like an artist. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from cold, but from something else, something hidden. "Where'd you learn to draw like that?" Ethan asked, dropping his keys into the chip bowl on the counter. Sophie startled like he'd caught her in a crime. Then she quickly shrugged. "Just practice. Keeps me distracted." There it was again, that wall she built around herself. Lily ran to him, tugging his sleeve. "Daddy, look! Sophie made me a princess tower with a dragon." Ethan smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead. "Looks like the dragon doesn't stand a chance." Sophie lowered her eyes, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But as Ethan turned toward the refrigerator, he caught something flicker across her face. Sadness mixed with fear. The kindness Ethan offered wasn't without its cost. Money was always tight. He picked up double shifts whenever possible, leaving before dawn and coming home bone-tired after dark. Some nights he skipped dinner so Lily and Sophie could eat. He never complained out loud, but Sophie noticed. One night when Lily was asleep, she whispered across the dimly lit living room, "Why do you do this for me, Ethan? You've got your own struggles." He leaned back against the wall, rubbing his sore shoulders. "Because you needed someone, and because I want my daughter to grow up knowing kindness still matters, even when life beats you down." Sophie blinked back tears, turning her face away so he wouldn't see. But he did. He saw everything about her, the way she tensed at unexpected noises, how she positioned herself to see all exits in a room, the careful way she checked outside before opening the front door. In January, when Lily's school assigned a family tree project, Sophie helped her create an elaborate display. Ethan watched from the doorway as Sophie guided Lily's hands, showing her how to arrange the photos of Maria. "Was she nice?" Sophie asked gently, as Lily placed a picture of her mother on the board. "Daddy says she had the biggest heart in the world," Lily replied. "She used to sing me songs about ladybugs. I don't really remember, though." "That's why photos are important," Sophie said. "They help us remember the people we love." She glanced up, catching Ethan's eye. Something passed between them. Understanding. Shared loss. That night, Ethan found Sophie in the kitchen, staring at a photo of her own. She quickly slid it into her backpack when she heard him approach. "Your family?" he asked. Sophie's hand stilled. "Yes." She didn't elaborate. Ethan recognized the boundaries. He'd built enough of his own after Maria died. "Hot chocolate?" he offered instead, reaching for the mix Lily loved. "I've never actually had hot chocolate," Sophie admitted. Ethan nearly dropped the box. "What? How is that possible?" Sophie's laugh sounded hollow. "My parents weren't exactly the hot chocolate type." He made 2 mugs, topped with the mini marshmallows he kept for Lily's special occasions. Sophie took a tentative sip, then her eyes widened with genuine pleasure. "This is really good." "Life's simple joys," Ethan said, raising his mug in a mock toast. Sophie's smile faded. "I think I missed a lot of those." In February, a pipe burst in the apartment above, sending water cascading through their ceiling. Sophie reacted with surprising efficiency, moving electronics to safety and placing buckets to catch the worst leaks, while Ethan frantically called the landlord. Later, as they mopped up water, Ethan commented, "You're good in a crisis." "Lots of practice," she murmured, then caught herself. "I mean, at the university, fire drills and stuff." Ethan noticed the slip, but didn't press. Every day brought new glimpses of Sophie's past, her perfect table manners, her knowledge of classical music, the way she automatically straightened her posture when answering the phone. None of it fit with the story of an ordinary college student. Money grew tighter. The repair bill for the water damage ate into Ethan's savings. Then his car needed a new transmission. Parts he could install himself, but couldn't get at cost without Mike's approval. "Take it out of my next paycheck," Ethan asked, standing in Mike's cluttered office. Mike shook his head. "Can't do it, Cole. Business is slow. I barely have enough for regular hours, let alone advances." That night, Sophie found Ethan at the kitchen table, bills spread before him, calculator in hand. Without a word, she sat beside him. Together, they moved numbers around, trying to create an impossible math where too little covered too much. Finally, Ethan pushed the papers away. I don't know how to make this work. Sophie hesitated, then reached into her backpack. She pulled out a small roll of cash. Not much, but more than Ethan expected her to have. I can help, she said quietly. Ethan stared at the money. Where did you get that? I've been tutoring kids at the library. She set the cash on the table. It's not much, but it's something. Pride warred with necessity in Ethan's chest. The money would cover Lily's school field trip and part of the electric bill. I can't take this. You're not taking it. I'm contributing to the household I live in. Her voice was gentle but firm. Let me help, Ethan. Please. He accepted with reluctance, promising himself he'd pay her back somehow. What he didn't know was that Sophie had been stretching the truth. She hadn't earned the money tutoring. It was the last of the emergency cash her father's loyal lawyer had smuggled to her before she disappeared. In March, Lily caught the flu that was sweeping through her school. Fever spiked her small body to 103 degrees. Ethan called in sick to work, earning a warning from Mike about attendance. Sophie took over, applying cool compresses to Lily's forehead, coaxing liquid into her with patience Ethan couldn't muster through his worry. My mom was a pediatrician, she explained when Ethan commented on her skill. Then she froze, realizing her mistake. Was? Ethan asked carefully. Sophie's face closed like a shutter. She died 2 years ago. I'm sorry, Ethan said, recognizing the familiar shape of grief in her words. Both parents? A quick nod, then Sophie turned away, busying herself with rearranging the medicine bottles on Lily's nightstand. Her hands trembled slightly. You don't have to talk about it, he assured her. Thank you, she whispered. Lily recovered, but the days Ethan missed put them further behind financially. The loan sharks who'd been circling since Maria's medical bills began arriving in person, first at the apartment, then at the auto shop. Men with carefully blank expressions and veiled threats about collecting what's owed. One Thursday afternoon, Sophie was helping Lily with homework at the kitchen table when a sharp knock came at the door. Ethan opened it to find 2 men in expensive suits that didn't match the neighborhood. Mr. Cole, the taller one said, not a question. Meridian Financial Services, we need to discuss your payment arrangement. Sophie appeared at Ethan's shoulder. Lily's working on her fractions, she said calmly. Why don't you help her while I speak with these gentlemen? Before Ethan could protest, Sophie stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. Through the thin walls, he heard fragments of conversation. Sophie's voice firm, professional, using terms like predatory lending and regulatory violations. The men's responses grew increasingly defensive. 10 minutes later, she returned, a satisfied gleam in her eyes. What did you do? Ethan asked. Negotiated, she shrugged. They've agreed to restructure your debt with a reasonable interest rate and payment plan. You'll have the paperwork tomorrow. Ethan stared at her. How? I've been trying for months. I took some business classes, she said vaguely. People like that back down when you know the right pressure points. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan was jolted awake by a soft sobbing sound. He followed it into the living room and found Sophie on the floor, clutching her backpack to her chest. Papers were scattered across the carpet, legal documents, property deeds, something with a corporate logo, and the words Hart Estate Holdings in bold letters. Sophie, he whispered. She gasped and shoved the papers back into her bag, panic flaring in her eyes. Please don't look at that. Ethan froze. His gut told him this wasn't just some college kid down on her luck. But her voice was breaking, her hands shaking frequently. She wasn't ready to tell him. He knelt beside her, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. Hey, you don't have to explain. Not until you're ready. I just want you to know you're safe here. Her entire body sagged with relief like she'd been holding her breath for years. You don't understand, she whispered. If people find out, I'll lose everything. Ethan frowned, confused but unwilling to press. Instead, he simply nodded. Then it stays between us. The following week brought a late March snowstorm that shut down the city. Schools closed. The auto shop, too. Ethan, Sophie, and Lily spent 3 days trapped in the apartment together, playing board games by candlelight when the power flickered out. During a particularly competitive round of Monopoly, Lily landed on Sophie's hotel-laden Park Place. I'm bankrupt, she declared with the drama only an 8-year-old could muster. Well, we can't have that, Sophie said, eyes twinkling. How about a business arrangement? You can work off your debt by drawing me a picture of a dinosaur wearing a top hat. Lily giggled. That's not how Monopoly works. Sure it is, Sophie insisted. It's called creative financing. Ethan watched them, something warm unfurling in his chest. For the first time in 3 years, the apartment felt like a home, not just a place they lived. That night, with Lily asleep and the power still out, Ethan and Sophie sat by the window, watching snow transform the grimy street into something magical. Their faces were illuminated only by candlelight, shadows dancing across features softened by the darkness. Tell me something true, Ethan said quietly. Something about yourself. Doesn't have to be big. Sophie was silent so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I'm afraid of forgetting who I am. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Who are you, Sophie Hart? She turned to him, vulnerability naked on her face. I don't know anymore. I've been running so long, I'm not sure what's left when I stop. Ethan wanted to reach for her hand, but sensed she needed space more than comfort. Whatever you're running from, he said carefully, you don't have to face it alone. Sophie smiled sadly. Some battles can only be fought by yourself. Maybe, but it helps to have someone in your corner. The power returned the next morning. Life resumed its rhythm. Sophie continued helping around the apartment, her presence becoming so natural, Ethan couldn't imagine their lives without her. Lily blossomed under her attention, bringing home improved grades and talking endlessly about when Sophie teaches me this or that. Then came the night that changed everything. April arrived with rain that washed away the last of winter's grime. Sophie had been with them nearly 4 months, far longer than the week she'd initially suggested. She never spoke of leaving anymore. Ethan never asked. They had fallen into a comfortable routine, an unspoken agreement that somehow this arrangement worked. One Tuesday evening, Ethan was helping Lily prepare for her school's science fair. Sophie had gone to the corner store for supplies. When she didn't return after 45 minutes, Ethan felt the first prickle of worry. An hour later, the apartment door burst open. Sophie stumbled in, her face ashen, clutching a newspaper. They found me, she whispered, thrusting the paper at Ethan. The headline jumped out. Hart heiress still missing after 6 months. Below it, a photo of Sophie, hairstyled differently, wearing pearls and a tailored blazer, but unmistakably her, standing beside an older couple on the deck of a yacht. Sophia Hart, 19, sole heir to the Hart Island resort fortune, disappeared from her family's Connecticut estate in October. The article read, her aunt and uncle, who became her guardians following the tragic deaths of James and Eleanor Hart in 2022, fear she may have been kidnapped or worse. Ethan looked up, stunned. You're not who you thought. Sophie's voice trembled. I'm sorry, I never meant to lie to you. Lily appeared in the hallway, eyes wide with confusion. What's wrong? Sophie knelt before her, hands gripping Lily's small shoulders. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. But I need to talk to your dad alone for a minute. Can you go read in your room? Once Lily was gone, Sophie collapsed onto the couch, hands covering her face. I should have told you sooner. I couldn't risk it. Ethan sat beside her, mind racing. Start from the beginning. The story spilled out in broken fragments. Sophie's parents had built a sustainable tourism empire centered around the private island they owned off the Connecticut coast. When they died in a suspicious boating accident 2 years ago, control of the company passed to Sophie's aunt and uncle as trustees until her 21st birthday. At first, they seemed supportive, but then I started noticing discrepancies in the financial reports. Sophie's voice hardened. They were embezzling, selling off parts of the island to developers, going against everything my parents built. When I confronted them, they tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Jesus, Ethan breathed. I had to run. My father's lawyer, the only person I still trust, helped me disappear. He's been gathering evidence while I've been hiding. She looked up, eyes desperate for understanding. I couldn't tell you. If they found out where I was, they'd come after me. They'd come after you and Lily, too. The pieces fell into place. Sophie's business knowledge, her formal manners, the way she carried herself with an unconscious confidence that no amount of hardship could erase. Why now? Ethan asked. Why tell me tonight? Sophie passed him the newspaper again, pointing to a smaller article near the bottom. Because time's running out. The headline read, Hart Enterprises announces major development deal. According to the piece, Sophie's aunt and uncle had scheduled a press conference in 2 weeks to announce the sale of the eastern half of Hart Island to a luxury resort chain. Once that deal goes through, the island is lost forever. My parents promised the locals they'd never sell. These people have lived there for generations. Sophie's voice broke. I can't let it happen. Ethan's mind reeled with implications. What are you going to do? Fight back. My 21st birthday is in 3 months. If I can delay the sale until then, I automatically gain control of the estate. Determination hardened her features. Mr. Caldwell, my lawyer, says we have enough evidence to challenge my aunt and uncle in court, but I need to come out of hiding. The weight of her words settled over them. Coming out of hiding meant leaving. Leaving meant their fragile family unit would shatter. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. Mike from the auto shop. Reluctantly, he answered. Cole, you need to get down here, Mike said without preamble. Some suits are asking about your house guest. Real pushy types. Said they're family, but something feels off. Ice shot through Ethan's veins. Don't tell them anything. I'm on my way. He hung up, turning to Sophie. They're looking for you at the shop. Terror flashed across her face. They must have tracked me through the newspaper purchase. I was careless. Pack a bag, Ethan said, already moving toward Lily's room. Essential items only. We need to go. We? Sophie's voice caught. Ethan, this is my fight, not yours. He turned back, resolve hardening his features. You've been part of this family for 4 months. We don't abandon family. 20 minutes later, they slipped out the back entrance of the apartment building. Rain pelted them as they hurried toward Ethan's newly repaired car, Lily between them clutching her backpack and Mr. Bean's. Where are we going, Daddy? She asked, excitement rather than fear in her voice. Children, Ethan thought, could find adventure in crisis. To a safe place, he answered, helping her into the back seat. Just for a little while. They drove through the night, heading north toward the Massachusetts border. Sophie directed them to a small lake house hidden among pine trees, a property listed under her mother's maiden name that her aunt and uncle didn't know about. As dawn broke over the still water, Lily finally fell asleep on a dusty couch. Ethan and Sophie stood on the narrow deck, watching mist rise from the lake's surface. I never meant for this to happen, Sophie said, guilt heavy in her voice. I never meant to drag you into my mess. Some messes are worth being dragged into. Ethan turned to her. What happens now? Sophie squared her shoulders, no longer the frightened girl he'd found in an alley 4 months ago. Now I stop running and start fighting. The lake house was a time capsule, sealed 15 years earlier when Sophie's grandmother passed away. Dust covered every surface. The electricity worked, but the plumbing protested with rusty groans. Still, it offered sanctuary they desperately needed. Ethan called Mike with a carefully constructed half-truth about a family emergency. Sophie contacted her lawyer from a prepaid phone, arranging a meeting for the following day. Lily, adaptable as only children can be, treated the whole situation like an unexpected vacation. It's like camping, but with walls, she declared, exploring every corner of the small house with unrestrained curiosity. By evening, they had cleared enough dust to make the place habitable. Sophie disappeared into the single bedroom to speak privately with her lawyer, while Ethan entertained Lily with shadow puppets cast by flashlight against the living room wall. When Sophie emerged, her face was set with renewed purpose. Mr. Caldwell is meeting us tomorrow in Rockport. He's bringing documents I need to sign to initiate legal proceedings. Ethan nodded, trying to ignore the heaviness settling in his chest. Every step Sophie took toward reclaiming her identity was a step away from them, from the life they'd begun to build together. What can I do to help? He asked instead. Sophie's expression softened. You already have, more than you know. The meeting took place in a private room above a seafood restaurant overlooking Rockport Harbor. Mr. Caldwell was a man in his 60s with silver hair and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. He embraced Sophie like a daughter before turning an appraising gaze on Ethan and Lily. So, these are the guardian angels who've kept you safe, he said, his voice carrying the refined accent of old New England money. Lily grinned up at him. I'm not an angel, I'm a third grader. Caldwell laughed. Even better. While Lily colored at a corner table with the crayons provided by the restaurant, the adults spread documents across the main table. Ethan tried to follow the legal terminology, injunctions, fiduciary responsibility, conservatorship challenges, but soon found himself lost in a sea of legalese. In simple terms, Caldwell explained, noticing Ethan's confusion, we're filing an emergency petition to block the development deal until Sophie's control of the estate can be properly established. And the chances of success, Ethan asked? Caldwell's expression tightened, challenging. The Whitfields, Sophie's aunt and uncle, have spent 18 months establishing themselves as her legal guardians and protectors of the estate. They've crafted a narrative that Sophie is unstable, traumatized by her parents' deaths. That's a lie, Ethan said sharply. Of course it is, Caldwell agreed, but it's a compelling story they've been selling to business partners, employees, even the media. Breaking that narrative won't be easy. Sophie looked up from the documents she'd been signing. We have the truth on our side, Baum. The truth helps, Caldwell conceded, but in cases like this, perception often matters more. As they prepared to leave, Caldwell took Ethan aside. You've done a remarkable thing looking after her. Not many would take such a risk for a stranger. She wasn't a stranger for long, Ethan replied. The older man studied him, then nodded once. She'll need allies in the days ahead, people she can trust without question. She has me, Ethan said simply. She has us. They returned to the lake house with a plan and a timeline. Sophie would remain in hiding for 3 more days while Caldwell filed the legal paperwork. Then she would emerge publicly, presenting herself as the rightful heir to Hart Enterprises at a press conference scheduled to counter her relative's announcement. Those 3 days at the lake house took on a dreamlike quality. With the weight of secrecy lifted, Sophie shared stories of her childhood on Hart Island, swimming in hidden coves, exploring the nature preserve her parents had established, learning the business from her father who believed she would one day take his place. It sounds beautiful, Ethan said as they sat on the dock, feet dangling in the cool water, while Lily attempted to skip stones across the lake's surface. It was, Sophie's voice caught. It still could be. On their last night, Lily fell asleep early, exhausted from a day spent exploring the woods surrounding the property. Ethan and Sophie sat on the porch, watching stars emerge above the tree line. The spring air carried a hint of warming earth and new possibilities. Are you scared? Ethan asked. Sophie considered the question. Not of my aunt and uncle, not anymore. She turned to him, moonlight silvering her profile. I'm scared of what comes after, of becoming the person they expect me to be. Who's that? Sophia Hart, heiress, the girl in pearls and tailored suits, who attends charity galas and sits in boardrooms. Her hands twisted in her lap. Sometimes I think Sophie from your couch was more real than she ever was. Ethan wanted to tell her she could be both, the business leader and the woman who made his daughter laugh with silly voices. But before he could find the words, Sophie's phone buzzed with a message from Caldwell. The legal papers had been filed. Tomorrow, Sophie Hart would return to the world. The press conference was held at the Hartford Marriott, a neutral location suggested by Caldwell. Sophie emerged from the hotel bathroom transformed. Gone were the borrowed clothes and simple ponytail. In their place stood a young woman in a conservative blue dress, hair arranged in a smooth chignon. Only her eyes remained unchanged, determined, a little frightened, seeking Ethan's reassurance. You look like a grown-up princess, Lily declared, adjusting her own dress, the nicest one she owned, hastily purchased from a department store the previous day. Sophie knelt to Lily's level. And you look like the bravest, smartest girl I know. She pressed something into Lily's hand, a small silver charm shaped like a bear. For luck. Caldwell appeared at the door. It's time. The hotel conference room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as Sophie entered with Caldwell at her side. Ethan and Lily waited in an adjoining room, watching on a monitor as Sophie took her position behind a podium bearing the Hart Enterprises logo. My name is Sophia Eleanor Hart, she began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. 6 months ago, I left my home, fearing for my safety and the future of my family's legacy. Today, I'm here to reclaim both. She outlined the allegations against her aunt and uncle with the precision of someone who had spent months gathering evidence. She spoke of her parents' vision for Hart Island, sustainable development that preserved its natural beauty while supporting the local community. She promised to honor that vision as the rightful leader of Hart Enterprises. This is not about money or power, she concluded. This is about responsibility. To my parents' memory, to the people who call Hart Island home, to the future we choose to build together. The questions afterward were chaotic, reporters shouting over each other. Sophie handled them with unexpected poise, neither denying her disappearance nor apologizing for it. When asked where she had been hiding, she simply said, "With people who saw me as a person, not an asset to be controlled." It was over in 20 minutes. Caldwell escorted Sophie back to the waiting room where Ethan and Lily embraced her. The tension drained from Sophie's body as she melted into their arms. "You were amazing," Ethan whispered against her hair. "It's just beginning," she replied, but her voice held conviction now instead of fear. They had barely begun to celebrate when Caldwell's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened to the caller. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," he said after hanging up. "The Whitfields have called an emergency board meeting at Hart Enterprises headquarters. They're trying to push the development deal through before our injunction can be processed." "Can they do that?" Ethan asked. "Legally? Yeah, by name. No, but they control the board. If they get the votes today, they can present it as a fait accompli." Caldwell checked his watch. "The meeting starts in 40 minutes. "Then we need to be there," Sophie said, straightening her shoulders. The Hart Enterprises headquarters occupied a renovated historical building in downtown Hartford. Its granite facade and imposing columns projected stability and tradition, values the company had built its reputation upon. Their small group hurried up the steps, only to be stopped by security guards at the entrance. "I'm sorry, Ms. Hart, but we have strict instructions," one guard said apologetically. "No one is allowed in during the board meeting." "I am Sophia Hart," she replied, voice ringing with authority. "This is my company." The guard shifted uncomfortably. "We have orders directly from Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield. If you'll just wait until the meeting concludes." That will be too late. The standoff might have continued if not for an elderly woman emerging from the elevator behind the security desk. She froze at the sight of Sophie, hand flying to her chest. "Miss Sophia, is that really you?" "Mrs. Abernathy," Sophie's voice softened with genuine affection. "Yes, it's me." The woman, apparently a longtime employee, hurried forward, brushing past the guards to embrace Sophie. "Thank heavens, we've been so worried." "Mrs. Abernathy, I need to get to the board meeting. It's urgent." Understanding flashed in the older woman's eyes. She straightened, suddenly all business. "Follow me. We'll use your father's private elevator." The guards hesitated, caught between conflicting authorities. Taking advantage of their indecision, Mrs. Abernathy led their group toward a discreet door at the side of the lobby. She swiped a security card, ushering them into a wood-paneled elevator. "12th floor," she said as the doors closed. "The meeting started 10 minutes ago." Sophie squeezed the woman's hand. "Thank you." "Your father would be proud," Mrs. Abernathy replied simply. The boardroom fell silent when Sophie pushed open the double doors. 8 men and women in expensive suits turned toward the interruption, expressions ranging from shock to calculation to barely concealed fury. At the head of the table sat Maxwell and Vivian Whitfield, Sophie's aunt and uncle, both rising to their feet with practiced concern masking their alarm. "Sophia," Vivian exclaimed, pressing a manicured hand to her heart. "My dear girl, where have you been? We've been out of our minds with worry." "I doubt that very much, Aunt Vivian," Sophie replied coolly, moving to stand at the opposite end of the table. Caldwell took position at her right shoulder, Ethan at her left. Lily, sensing the tension, pressed herself against her father's side. Maxwell Whitfield recovered quickly, his handsome face arranging itself into an expression of paternal concern. "Everyone, if you'll please excuse us, this is clearly a family matter that requires privacy." "No," Sophie's voice cut through the room with surprising authority. "This concerns everyone present. The board should hear what I have to say." A murmur ran through the directors. One elderly man, Sophie had called him Mr. Harrington during their entry, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should listen to Ms. Hart." Maxwell's jaw tightened, but he gestured magnanimously. "Of course, though I must express concern about my niece's state of mind. She's been through a traumatic experience." "My mind is perfectly clear," Sophie interrupted. "Clear enough to understand what you're trying to do with the oceanic development deal." She placed the folder Caldwell handed her on the table, extracting several documents. These are the environmental impact studies your proposal deliberately ignored. These are the land use agreements my parents signed with the island residents that your deal would violate. And this, she placed a final document in the center of the table, is the petition for removal of trustees on grounds of breach of fiduciary duty that Mr. Caldwell filed this morning. The boardroom erupted in confused questions. Maxwell slammed his hand on the table, demanding order. In the chaos, Vivian approached Sophie, her voice lowered to a venomous whisper. You ungrateful little fool. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Exactly what my parents would have wanted, Sophie replied, not backing down. Vivian's perfect facade cracked, revealing the calculation beneath. Your parents were idealistic dreamers who nearly ran this company into the ground. We spent 2 years salvaging what they almost destroyed. By selling off the very land they promised to protect? By making it profitable, Vivian hissed. Something you're clearly too naive to understand. Maxwell regained control of the room, his voice cutting through the din. Directors, my niece is understandably emotional after her ordeal. Perhaps we should adjourn until she's had time to process everything that's happened. I don't need time, Sophie said firmly. I need answers, like why the board wasn't informed that the oceanic deal would require evicting families who've lived on Hard Island for generations, or why the environmental assessments were falsified to hide the impact on protected wetlands. One of the younger board members leaned forward. Is this true, Maxwell? Of course not, he scoffed. These are wild accusations from a traumatized young woman who's been missing for months. Who knows what she's been told or by whom? He cast a pointed look at Ethan, standing silently at Sophie's side. Sophie's voice remained steady. The documents speak for themselves, and in 3 months, when I turn 21, I'll have controlling interest in this company, regardless of what happens today. The only question is how much damage you'll do before then. The room fell silent as the board members exchanged glances, mentally recalculating their positions. Maxwell's charm hardened into something colder. Sophia, be reasonable. You disappeared for 6 months. You abandoned your responsibilities. The board has every reason to question your judgment, even after you come of age. I left because you were trying to have me declared mentally incompetent, Sophie shot back. After I questioned the financial discrepancies I found in the company accounts. This revelation sent another ripple through the board. Mr. Harrington spoke up again. What discrepancies? Before Sophie could answer, Maxwell cut in smoothly. My niece misinterpreted standard accounting practices. Her business education is incomplete, which is understandable given her age. I may be young, Sophie acknowledged, but I know the difference between creative accounting and embezzlement. The accusation hung in the air, electric with implications. Vivian's perfectly composed expression slipped again, revealing a flash of panic before she regained control. These are serious allegations, another board member said cautiously. Perhaps we should postpone any decisions until they can be properly investigated. Maxwell recognized the shifting mood. His voice hardened with authority. The oceanic deal has been in negotiation for months. Their offer expires at midnight. Postponing the vote isn't an option. Neither is ignoring potential fraud, Caldwell interjected smoothly. As legal counsel to the Hart estate, I must advise the board that proceeding with this vote could expose each of you to personal liability. The warning landed exactly as intended. Board members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the legal quicksand beneath their expensive shoes. Maxwell's face flushed with barely controlled rage. This is absurd. We've acted in the company's best interests at every turn. Sophia's accusations are the desperate attempts of a child playing at business. Sophie stepped forward, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. If I'm just a child, why were you so afraid of what I might find that you tried to have me declared incompetent? Why did you tell everyone I was kidnapped when you knew I left voluntarily? What are you hiding, Uncle Maxwell? The direct challenge hung in the air. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Maxwell's eyes, calculation giving way to genuine anger. He took a step toward Sophie before catching himself, aware of the watching board members. I think, Mr. Harrington said into the tense silence, that we should table the oceanic vote pending further review of Ms. Hart's concerns. Other directors nodded in agreement. Maxwell's carefully constructed momentum was unraveling thread by thread. "This meeting isn't adjourned," he snapped. "We still have a quorum and a scheduled vote." "Actually," Sophie said, "you don't. Not anymore." She nodded to Caldwell, who distributed another set of documents. "These are temporary restraining orders preventing 3 board members, those with direct financial interests in oceanic development, from voting on this matter due to undisclosed conflicts of interest." Maxwell snatched the paper, scanning it with growing fury. "This is outrageous." "No," Sophie replied calmly. "This is proper corporate governance. Something my parents valued above all else." The meeting dissolved into procedural arguments and legal consultations. Through it all, Sophie stood firm, answering questions with growing confidence. Ethan watched with a mixture of pride and realization. This was a side of Sophie he'd never seen, the leader she'd been raised to become. Lily tugged at his hand, bored with the adult discussions. "Daddy, is Sophie winning?" Ethan squeezed her fingers gently. "I think she is, sweetheart." By the time they left Hart Enterprises 2 hours later, the oceanic deal was postponed indefinitely pending a full audit. The board had scheduled an emergency session to review the evidence Sophie and Caldwell presented. Most importantly, Sophie had reclaimed her voice in her position within the company her parents built. "That was incredible," Ethan said as they walked toward the parking garage. "You were incredible." Sophie's professional demeanor melted into exhausted relief. "I was terrified the entire time." "Couldn't tell." He bumped her shoulder gently with his. "You look like you were born for that room." Her smile faltered. "I was, I guess. That's what scares me." Before he could ask what she meant, Caldwell approached with news. The Whitfields had left the building immediately after the meeting, refusing to speak with reporters gathering outside. More concerning, they had apparently emptied their offices the previous day, almost as if they'd anticipated today's confrontation and prepared an escape. "They knew I was coming," Sophie realized. "But how?" "Someone must have leaked information about our legal filings," Caldwell frowned. "The question is, what will they do next?" They found out 3 hours later. While checking into a hotel, the lake house deemed too remote given the evolving situation, Sophie's phone pinged with news alerts. The Whitfields had called a press conference of their own. They watched in disbelief as Maxwell Whitfield, the picture of paternal concern, expressed deep worry over his niece's mental state. He described Sophie's disappearance as a psychotic break triggered by unresolved grief over her parents' deaths. Her accusations, he claimed, were paranoid delusions that the family had been privately treating before she ran away. "We only want what's best for Sophia," he told the cameras with practiced sincerity. "Her parents would want her to get the help she needs before taking on the pressures of the business world." Sophie hurled the remote at the television. "Liar!" Caldwell's expression was grave. "This complicates wicketers, though. They're laying groundwork to challenge your competency again." "Can they do that?" Ethan asked, "after everything Sophie revealed today?" "They can try," Caldwell acknowledged. "Character assassination is often effective, especially when wrapped in apparent concern." Sophie paced the hotel room, fury giving way to determination. "Then we need to move faster. Find concrete proof of their embezzlement before they can destroy the evidence." "The audit will take weeks," Caldwell cautioned. "We don't have weeks." Sophie stopped pacing, a new idea forming. "But we might have something else. Ethan, you said your wife worked as an administrative assistant before Lily was born?" Ethan nodded, confused by the sudden change in topic. "For a few different companies." "Why?" "One of them was a subsidiary of Hart Enterprises, Atlantic Hospitality Management." Sophie's eyes brightened with realization. "That's why your name sounded familiar when we first met. My father mentioned a Maria Cole who noticed discrepancies in vendor payments. This was about 3 years ago." Ethan's heart contracted at the mention of Maria's name. "That sounds like her. She was always detail-oriented. But what does this have to do with now?" "If Maria found evidence of financial irregularities 3 years ago, it could establish a pattern of behavior predating my parents' deaths." Sophie turned to Caldwell. "That would strengthen our case considerably." The lawyer nodded thoughtfully. "If we had documentation, certainly." Maria kept everything, Ethan said slowly, memory stirring. Work notes, emails she printed out. She was meticulous that way. He paused, considering. Most of her things are in storage. After she died, I couldn't sort through it all. The unspoken pain hung in the air. Sophie touched his arm gently. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. He covered her hand with his. If Maria found something that can help you, she would want me to find it. The storage unit was in a facility on the outskirts of Bridgeport. Ethan hadn't visited in over 2 years, paying the monthly fee automatically while avoiding the memories boxed away inside. The metal door protested as he rolled it upward, revealing stacked containers of a life interrupted. Sophie stood beside him, Lily's hand in hers. We'll help you look. They worked methodically through labeled boxes. Lily approached the task with unexpected gentleness, asking questions about the mother she barely remembered as they uncovered photographs and keepsakes. Each item was a fragment of the woman who had been the center of Ethan's world. Her favorite coffee mug, the novel she never finished reading, the blue scarf she wore on their first date. She was beautiful, Sophie said softly, holding a framed photo of Maria laughing on a beach. Inside and out, Ethan agreed, throat tight. It was Lily who found the important box, tucked behind winter clothes and holiday decorations. Daddy, this one says work stuff on it. Inside were folders organized by employer, each containing Maria's meticulous notes. The Atlantic Hospitality Management section was substantial. Contracts, meeting minutes, in a separate folder labeled simply problems. Ethan opened it with reverent hands. The first page was a handwritten note in Maria's familiar script. Discrepancies in shoreline project payments. Amounts don't match approved invoices. Mentioned to MW, said he would look into it. No response after 2 weeks, creating separate record of findings. MW, Sophie breathed, Maxwell Whitfield. The folder contained detailed records of payments to vendors that didn't exist, invoices for services never performed, all authorized by Maxwell Whitfield in his role as operations director. Maria had meticulously documented each irregularity, even copying emails where she raised concerns to her superiors. She knew, Ethan said, a mixture of pride and renewed grief washing through him. She found the same thing you did, Sophie. And they ignored her, Sophie added grimly, just like they tried to silence me. Caldwell, who had been reviewing the documents with growing interest, looked up. This is exactly what we need, proof that the financial misconduct began years ago, well before they became trustees of the estate. They carefully packed Maria's records, treating them with the reverence they deserved. As they prepared to leave, Ethan found himself lingering by the open storage unit, reluctant to reseal these pieces of Maria's life. We should take more of her things, Sophie suggested gently. For Lily, photos, mementos. She should have those connections to her mother. Ethan nodded, grateful beyond words. Together, they selected a box of photographs, Maria's jewelry box, and the half-finished baby blanket she'd been knitting when she got sick. Small treasures that kept her memory alive. As they drove back to the hotel, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional day. Sophie reached across the center console, taking Ethan's hand. Thank you, she said softly. I know how hard that was. Maria would have liked you, he replied, squeezing her fingers. She had the same sense of justice. Sophie's eyes glistened in the dashboard light. I wish I could have known her. In a way you do, through Lily. Ethan smiled sadly. She has her mother's heart. The next morning brought news that the FBI had opened an investigation into the Whitfields' financial activities. Maria's documentation, combined with Sophie's evidence, provided enough probable cause for search warrants. The couple had apparently left for a planned vacation in the Cayman Islands, a transparent attempt to flee jurisdiction that only reinforced suspicions. For Sophie, the battle shifted from defense to rebuilding. With the immediate threat to Hard Island neutralized, she turned her attention to repairing relationships with employees, residents, and business partners who had been misled during her absence. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and careful public appearances. Sophie insisted that Ethan and Lily remain with her at the Hartford Hotel, creating a protective bubble around their improvised family amid the chaos. Each evening, no matter how grueling the day, Sophie made time for Lily, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, maintaining the routines that had become precious to them all. Ethan watched their bond deepen, even as he sensed Sophie pulling away from him in subtle ways. The closer she came to reclaiming her inheritance, the more distance grew between them. "You're avoiding me," he said one night after Lily had fallen asleep. They stood on the hotel room balcony, city lights spread before them like fallen stars. Sophie didn't deny it. "I'm trying to prepare us both." "For what?" "For reality, Ethan." She turned to face him, moonlight catching the tears she refused to shed. "In 2 months, I take control of a multi-million-dollar company. I'll have responsibilities to hundreds of employees, to an entire island community." "I know that." "Do you?" Her voice softened. "Do you understand what that means for us? For this, whatever we've built together?" Ethan felt the question like a physical blow. "I thought we were building a family." "We were. We did." Sophie wrapped her arms around herself. "But families like yours and families like mine don't usually intersect, except in fairy tales." "That's bull, and you know it," Ethan said, anger flaring. "You're the one who talked about finding people who saw you as a person, not an asset. Was that just convenient while you needed somewhere to hide?" Hurt flashed across Sophie's face. "That's not fair. None of this is fair. Life isn't fair, but we make choices anyway." He stepped closer, close enough to see the conflict in her eyes. "You're choosing to push us away because it's easier than figuring out how we fit into your new life." "Or maybe I'm being realistic about the world we actually live in," Sophie countered. "What happens when I take you to board meetings? When the society pages start asking questions about the auto mechanic suddenly living with the heart heiress? When Lily has to navigate private schools where everyone knows her story?" "We'd figure it out together. That's what families do." Sophie turned away, blinking back tears. "I can't ask you to uproot your entire life for mine." "You didn't ask. I'm offering." Ethan gently turned her to face him. "Sophie, what are you really afraid of?" The question hung between them, honest and demanding. Sophie's composure cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath. "That I'll fail them," she whispered. "My parents, the island, everyone counting on me." Her voice broke. "And if I fail them, I'll fail you and Lily too. I can't bear that." Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling her resistance melt as she buried her face against his shoulder. "You won't fail. But even if things get hard, and they will, we'll be there. That's the point of not doing this alone." Sophie didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. They stood together as the city hummed below, the future unwritten before them. The next morning, Caldwell arrived with news. The board had scheduled an emergency session to formally recognize Sophie as CEO upon her 21st birthday. More immediately, they had approved her request to visit Hart Island, her first return home since fleeing 6 months earlier. "They're arranging a boat for tomorrow," Caldwell explained. "A private visit, no press, just to allow you to reacquaint yourself with the property and meet with the resident council." Sophie's eyes lit with an excitement Ethan hadn't seen before. "Can Ethan and Lily come?" "Of course, I assumed they would." Caldwell smiled knowingly. "The boat leaves from Stonington Harbor at 9. After he left, Sophie turned to Ethan, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "You'll finally see it. My home." "Looking forward to it," he said, meaning it despite the lingering tension from their conversation the night before. Lily was ecstatic at the prospect of a boat ride to a real island. She spent the evening peppering Sophie with questions about wildlife, beaches, and whether there were any children her age living there. "A few families have children," Sophie confirmed. "The Sullivan kids are probably closest to your age. Their parents run the island's general store." "Do they have a school?" Lily asked. "A small one for the younger grades. The older kids take a boat to the mainland." Sophie smiled at the girls' excitement. "There's a library too, right on the beach. You can hear the waves while you read." Ethan listened to Sophie describe her childhood home, realizing how much of herself she'd kept hidden during their months together. This was Sophie in her element, passionate about the island, its people, its future. This was the woman she'd been raised to become. The next morning dawned clear and perfect. The drive to Stonington took just over an hour, the coastal highway winding past Connecticut towns that grew progressively more affluent. Sailboats dotted the harbor as they pulled into the marina where a gleaming white vessel awaited them. The captain, a weathered man in his 50s, recognized Sophie immediately. Miss Hart, he said, tipping his cap. Welcome back. Your island's been waiting for you. The journey across the sound took 40 minutes. Lily stood at the railing, pointing excitedly at diving seabirds and distant sailboats. Sophie grew quieter as the island appeared on the horizon, emotion washing across her face in visible waves. Hart Island rose from the water like something from a dream, rolling green hills, white sand beaches, and a small collection of buildings nestled in a natural harbor. Unlike the developed islands nearby, much of Hart Island remained wild, its forests and wetlands preserved by generations of careful stewardship. It's beautiful, Ethan said, joining Sophie at the bow. It's home, she replied, voice thick with emotion. As they approached the main dock, Ethan saw a small crowd gathering. Island residents, perhaps 30 in all, waiting to welcome Sophie back. Their faces showed a mixture of curiosity, hope, and relief. The moment the boat secured to the dock, a woman in her 70s pushed forward. Sophia Hart, she called, arms outstretched. You come give Martha Sullivan a proper hug this instant. Sophie practically flew into the woman's embrace, all professional composure forgotten. Martha, she choked out, I've missed you so much. We've missed you too, child. This island hasn't been the same without you. Martha held Sophie at arm's length, examining her with a grandmother's critical eye. Too thin. We'll fix that. Her gaze shifted to Ethan and Lily, still standing awkwardly on the boat. And who are these folks you've brought with you? Sophie reached back, drawing Ethan and Lily forward. This is Ethan Cole and his daughter Lily. She faltered, searching for words to encompass everything they had become to each other. They saved me, she finished simply. The island welcomed them with open arms. Martha Sullivan insisted they join an impromptu lunch at the general store, where island residents gathered to hear Sophie's story and share their own experiences during her absence. The Whitfields had visited only twice, mainly to show potential developers around, a fact that reinforced the residents' distrust. We knew something wasn't right, Jack Finley, the island's maintenance manager, told Sophie. Your parents would never have agreed to sell off the eastern shore. And they won't be sold, Sophie promised. Not while I'm alive. After lunch, Sophie gave them a tour of the island. They walked along white sand beaches where Sophie had built sandcastles as a child, hiked through protected forests where she'd learned the names of trees and birds from her father, and visited the small schoolhouse where she'd studied alongside island children until high school. The Hart family home sat on a bluff overlooking the harbor, a sprawling New England-style house with weathered cedar shingles and a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Unlike the ostentatious mansions Ethan had seen on neighboring islands, this home was designed to blend with its surroundings, to frame the natural beauty rather than overshadow it. Sophie hesitated at the foot of the porch steps, emotion catching her breath. I haven't been inside since your parents? Ethan asked gently. She nodded. The Whitfields redecorated the mainland estate immediately. I was afraid they'd done the same here. Only one way to find out, he said, offering his hand. Sophie took it, drawing strength from his steady presence. Together they climbed the steps, Lily bouncing ahead with the resilience of childhood. The house opened into a great room with soaring ceilings and windows framing the ocean view. To Sophie's visible relief, it remained largely as she remembered. Her mother's collection of beach glass still arranged on windowsills, her father's marine charts still pinned to the study wall. The Whitfields had apparently focused their attention elsewhere, leaving this sanctuary untouched. It's waiting for you, Ethan said softly, like the island was. Sophie moved through the rooms like someone in a dream, trailing fingers over familiar surfaces, pausing to study photographs of happier times. Lily followed respectfully, asking quiet questions about the objects that caught her attention. In the library, a cozy room lined with built-in shelves, Sophie stopped before a framed photograph she clearly hadn't expected to find. It showed her parents on their wedding day, young and radiant with possibility. I thought this was lost, she whispered, carefully lifting it from the wall. My aunt claimed it was damaged during the move. Another lie, Ethan observed, one of many. Sophie replaced the photo with reverent hands. But they're gone now. This is mine again. The sun was beginning its descent when they finally made their way back to the harbor. The island had worked its magic on them all, Lily chattering about the shells she'd collected, Ethan marveling at the seamless integration of luxury and conservation. Sophie visibly reconnecting with the person she'd been before trauma forced her into hiding. As they prepared to board the boat for their return journey, Martha Sullivan approached with a basket of island produce and freshly baked bread. "For your dinner," she said, pressing it into Sophie's hands. "And this," she handed a smaller package to Lily, "is island maple candy, best in New England." Lily's eyes widened. "Thank you." Martha studied Sophie's face with knowing eyes. "When will you come home for good?" "Soon," Sophie promised. "There's still legal work to finish on the mainland, but soon." "And your friends?" Martha glanced meaningfully at Ethan and Lily. "Will they be joining you?" The question hung in the air between them, giving voice to the uncertainty that had been building since Sophie's identity was revealed. Before Sophie could formulate an answer, Lily spoke up. "We have to finish the school year first," she said matter-of-factly. "But Sophie said the island has a library right on the beach, and I want to read there." The adults exchanged surprised glances, Lily's simple expectation cutting through their adult complications. Martha laughed, patting the girl's head affectionately. "The library will be waiting for you, child. We all will." On the boat ride back to Stonington, Lily fell asleep between them on the cushioned bench, exhausted from the day's adventures. Sophie leaned against Ethan's shoulder, her own eyes heavy with emotional fatigue. "Thank you for coming today," she murmured, "for seeing where I come from." "It helps me understand you better," Ethan replied. "The island is part of who you are." "Yes," she hesitated, then added, "but so are you and Lily now. I just don't know how to reconcile those parts of my life." Ethan kissed the top of her head, letting the statement stand without pushing for more. Some questions couldn't be answered in a single day, no matter how transformative. The following week brought developments that forced their attention elsewhere. The FBI investigation into the Whitfields uncovered offshore accounts containing millions in misappropriated funds. International arrest warrants were issued, but the couple had disappeared from their Cayman Islands hotel, likely fleeing to a country without extradition. For Sophie, their escape was both infuriating and liberating. While justice remained incomplete, the threat they posed had effectively ended. With their crimes exposed, the board unanimously supported Sophie's early installation as CEO, a position she would formally assume on her upcoming birthday, now just 6 weeks away. Preparations for the transition consumed Sophie's days. She moved temporarily into her family's mainland estate, a necessary step for practical and symbolic reasons. Ethan and Lily returned to their Bridgeport apartment, their daily routines resuming with a hollowness none of them acknowledged. Sophie visited on weekends, bringing groceries that were too expensive for Ethan to accept, and gifts for Lily that were too thoughtful to refuse. The distance between Sophie's world and theirs grew more apparent with each visit. Her tailored clothing, the company car that delivered her, the constant calls and emails that interrupted their time together. "You don't have to keep coming," Ethan said during one such visit, after Lily had gone to bed. "We understand how busy you are." Sophie looked up from her laptop, hurt flashing across her face. "Do you want me to stop?" "Of course not, but this isn't fair to you, trying to live in both worlds." She closed the computer, giving him her full attention. "Both worlds are mine, Ethan. I'm just still figuring out how to bring them together." He wanted to believe her, but as April turned to May, her visits grew shorter, the calls between them briefer. The fairy tale was ending, reality reasserting itself with inexorable pressure. The invitation arrived on embossed stationery, Sophie's 21st birthday celebration, to be held at the Hart Estate on the mainland. A formal affair with board members, business partners, and local dignitaries. Ethan stared at the elegant script, understanding with painful clarity what it represented. A door closing between them. "We should go," Lily insisted when he suggested they might send a gift instead. "Sophie would be glad if we weren't there." His daughter's uncomplicated certainty decided the matter. They would go, dressed in the best clothes they owned, and wish Sophie well as she stepped fully into the life she was born for. A life that had no natural place for an auto mechanic and his daughter. The night of the party arrived clear and warm, early June wrapping the Connecticut coast in the first real heat of summer. The Hart Estate blazed with lights, luxury cars lining the circular drive as uniformed valets directed traffic. Ethan parked his own car down the street, uncomfortable with the thought of someone else handling his prized possession. Lily wore her Easter dress, hair carefully braided by Mrs. Greenberg, who had volunteered to help them prepare. Ethan had purchased a new shirt and tie, navy blue, which Maria had always said brought out his eyes. They carried a small gift wrapped in paper Lily had decorated herself. At the entrance, a young man with a tablet checked their names against the guest list. Mr. Cole and Miss Cole, he confirmed with a practiced smile. Miss Hart mentioned you might arrive separately from the main group. Please follow me. Instead of directing them to the grand ballroom where most guests were gathering, he led them through a side passage to a smaller room where Sophie waited alone. She wore a simple white dress, hair arranged in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked both older and younger than her 21 years, a woman on the cusp of her power, a girl preparing to say goodbye to her childhood. You came, she said, visible relief in her voice. Wouldn't miss it, Ethan replied, the practiced casualness costing him more than she could know. Lily rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Sophie's waist. Happy birthday! We made you a present. Sophie knelt to accept the package, unwrapping it with deliberate care. Inside was a framed photograph, the three of them at the lake house, laughing together on the dock. Ethan had almost forgotten Mrs. Greenberg had taken it with his phone. In the image, they looked like any family enjoying a perfect day. Connected. Complete. It's beautiful, Sophie whispered, fingers tracing the simple frame Lily had painted herself. The best gift I could receive. There's something else, Lily said importantly, reaching into her small purse. She withdrew the silver bear charm Sophie had given her months earlier. You should have this back for luck. Sophie closed Lily's fingers gently around the charm. It was a gift, remember? Besides, I have all the luck I need now that you're here. A discreet knock at the door signaled the party schedule moving forward. Sophie stood, squaring her shoulders beneath the elegant dress. I have to make an entrance and give a speech, she explained. Boring business stuff, but after that, she hesitated, something unreadable crossing her face. After that, I have an announcement to make. Something important. Ethan's chest tightened. An announcement, probably a formal declaration of her business plans, or perhaps the introduction of some suitable young executive as a potential partner. He forced a smile. We'll be there. Go be the CEO you were born to be. Sophie studied his face, seeming to search for words that wouldn't come. Instead, she simply nodded and followed her assistant toward the ballroom. The ballroom of the Hart estate glittered with wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over silk gowns and bespoke suits. Conversations flowed like the champagne, discussions of market trends, property values, and charitable contributions that doubled as tax write-offs. Ethan and Lily stood at the periphery, painfully conscious of their difference. Daddy, everyone keeps looking at us, Lily whispered, pressing closer to his side. They're just curious, Ethan replied, though he felt the stares too. Curious, assessing, dismissive. A server passed with a tray of champagne flutes, deliberately skipping them in favor of guests who belonged. From across the room, Caldwell noticed their isolation and made his way over, greeting them with genuine warmth. Ethan, Lily, I'm glad you could make it. He handed Lily a glass of sparkling cider he'd procured from somewhere. Quite the circus, isn't it? Not exactly our usual scene, Ethan admitted. Caldwell's eyes held understanding. Nor mine, to be honest. I prefer the island. Simpler, more authentic. He nodded toward the center of the room where board members clustered. These people never understood James and Eleanor Hart. I doubt they understand Sophie either. Before Ethan could respond, a hush fell over the gathering. Sophie entered the ballroom, poised and elegant as she made her way to a small platform where a microphone waited. The crowd parted before her, whispers trailing in her wake. She looked every inch the heiress in that moment, untouchable, belonging to a world Ethan could only glimpse from the outside. His heart ached with the certainty that this was who she truly was, who she had always been beneath the girl who had slept on his couch and braided his daughter's hair. Thank you all for coming, Sophie began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Traditionally, a 21st birthday marks a passage into adulthood. For me, it also marks a return and a beginning. She spoke briefly about her parents' vision for Hart Enterprises, the legacy they had built through ethical business practices and environmental stewardship. She acknowledged the challenges facing the company after the Whitfield's mismanagement and outlined her plans to restore its reputation and purpose. Throughout the speech, her eyes occasionally found Ethan and Lily in the crowd, a private connection amidst the public performance. Each glance sent a complicated ache through Ethan's chest, pride in her strength, grief for what they were losing. As I assume leadership of Hart Enterprises, Sophie continued, I've been reflecting on what makes a company truly successful. My father always said it wasn't profit margins or market share, but the impact we have on the communities we serve. She paused, her expression softening. I learned the truth of that lesson during my time away. When I had nothing, no name, no wealth, no power, I discovered what truly matters. Kindness freely given, courage in adversity, love that asks for nothing in return. Her gaze found Ethan again, holding steady this time. I found those qualities in an unexpected place, with people who saw me as simply Sophie, not as an heiress or an asset, but as a human being worthy of compassion. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Sophie gestured toward Ethan and Lily. Ethan Cole and his daughter Lily gave me shelter when I was homeless, friendship when I was alone, and courage when I had none of my own. They are the reason I stand before you today. The guests turned to stare openly now, curiosity transforming into something more calculating. Ethan fought the urge to shield Lily from their scrutiny, knowing this moment was important for Sophie. Which brings me to an announcement, Sophie continued, straightening her shoulders. As my first official act as CEO, I am establishing the Hart Foundation for Sustainable Community Development. This independent organization will oversee the restoration and preservation of Hart Island while creating economic opportunities for its residents. Polite applause filled the room. This was the kind of philanthropic gesture the assembled guests understood and approved of. But Sophie wasn't finished. The Foundation's first initiative will be a vocational training center specializing in sustainable building techniques and environmental conservation. I'm pleased to announce that Ethan Cole has agreed to lead the development of this program, bringing his expertise as a skilled mechanic and former military instructor to create opportunities for single parents and displaced workers. Ethan froze, confusion washing over him. He had agreed to no such thing. He hadn't even spoken to Sophie about her plans, let alone accepted a position within them. His discomfort must have shown on his face because Sophie quickly added, that is, if he accepts the offer. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. Ethan, Lily, would you join me up here? The moment stretched, awkward and expectant. Lily tugged at his hand, eager to join Sophie on the platform. Ethan followed with leaden feet, conscious of every eye tracking their progress through the crowd. When they reached Sophie's side, she took his hand in a gesture too intimate for business, too public to deny. I should have discussed this with you first, she said quietly, for his ears alone. But I needed everyone to understand what you mean to me, to us. Before he could respond, she turned back to the microphone. Hart Island has always been more than a piece of real estate to my family. It's been our home. And home isn't just a place, it's the people who make you feel like you belong. Her voice carried emotion now, unconcerned with the professional facade expected at such events. During these past months, I've learned that family can be found in unexpected places. Ethan and Lily became my family when I had none. Now I'm asking them to help me build something new on Hart Island. Not just a training center, but a true home for all of us. The implication wasn't lost on the assembled guests. Whispers surged through the crowd, faces registering surprise, disapproval, calculation. Sophie ignored them all, her focus entirely on Ethan. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, she said softly. Just promise you'll think about it. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and awkward conversations. Board members assessed Ethan with new interest, trying to determine if he was an asset or liability to their relationship with the new CEO. Socialites who had initially dismissed him now offered strained smiles and probing questions about his background. Through it all, Sophie remained at his side, a steady presence navigating the complicated social waters with the ease of someone born to them. Lily charmed everyone, unaware of the undercurrents, simply happy to be included in Sophie's special night. It was nearly midnight when they finally escaped to the estate's terrace, leaving the dwindling party behind. Lily had fallen asleep on a sofa in the library, exhausted by the excitement and late hour. "I'm sorry for putting you on the spot," Sophie said as they stood at the stone balustrade overlooking manicured gardens silvered by moonlight. "I should have talked to you first." "Yes, you should have." Ethan's voice was rougher than intended. "Sophie, what exactly are you doing?" She turned to face him, moonlight catching the unshed tears in her eyes. "Fighting for what matters. For who matters? By offering me a job I know nothing about, in front of half of Connecticut's elite? By refusing to let other people decide what's possible for us?" She stepped closer, placing her hand over his on the stone railing. "Ethan, I've spent 6 weeks trying to reconcile my two worlds. Tonight I realized I don't have to choose between them. I can change them instead." He shook his head, frustration rising. "You can't just announce life-changing decisions for other people. That's exactly what you fought against with your aunt and uncle." The comparison landed like a physical blow. Sophie flinched, withdrawing her hand. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You decided my future without asking me, Sophie. You put Lily and me on display for your business associates like we were part of your foundation's marketing materials." "That's not what I was doing," she protested. "I was trying to show them who you really are, who we are together." "And who is that exactly?" Ethan demanded, years of insecurity surging to the surface. "The charity case who makes your rags to riches story more compelling? The blue-collar project who proves you haven't forgotten your 6 months of slumming it?" Sophie recoiled as if struck. "Is that really what you think of me, after everything we've been through?" The hurt in her voice penetrated his anger. Ethan exhaled slowly, regret already replacing his outburst. "No, God, no, I'm sorry." "Then what is it?" Her voice softened. "Talk to me, Ethan. Please, ugh." He turned away, gathering his thoughts. "All those people in there, they were looking at us like we didn't belong. And they're right, we don't belong in that world, Sophie. But you belong with me," she said simply, "and I belong with you and Lily. The rest is just setting." Ethan shook his head. "It's not that simple. You were born into this. You were raised to run companies and manage estates. I fix cars for a living. Lily goes to public school where the textbooks are a decade old. And none of that matters." "It does matter," he interrupted gently. "Not because of status or money, but because of reality. You can't just transplant us into your world and expect everything to work out through sheer force of will." Sophie was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "You're right," she finally conceded. "I was arrogant to think I could simply announce a solution. But Ethan, that doesn't mean there isn't one." From inside came the sounds of the party winding down, final goodbyes, staff beginning to clear glasses and plates. Soon they would need to collect Lily and leave, returning to their separate lives with this conversation unresolved. "Come to the island tomorrow," Sophie said suddenly. "Just for the day, no announcements, no plans. Just you and Lily and me figuring things out together." The request was simple, reasonable. A chance to talk without the pressures of her birthday celebration bearing down on them. Ethan nodded. "Okay, tomorrow." Relief softened Sophie's features. She leaned forward, kissing his cheek with a tenderness that made his chest ache. "Thank you." That night, driving home with Lily asleep in the back seat, Ethan wrestled with conflicting emotions. He loved Sophie, he could admit that now, at least to himself. Had loved her perhaps since that first morning when she helped Lily clean up spilled cereal with gentle hands and comforting words. But love wasn't always enough. Sometimes practical realities created gaps too wide for even the strongest feelings to bridge. Morning brought clear skies and calm seas, perfect weather for a trip to Hard Island. Lily woke with excitement, already planning which beach to explore first. Her unquestioning enthusiasm made Ethan's heart twist. Children adapted so easily, accepting new circumstances without the baggage adults carried. Sophie met them at the Stonington dock, dressed simply in jeans and a light sweater, hair pulled back in a ponytail. Gone was the polished heiress from the night before. This was their Sophie, the one who had folded laundry in his apartment and taught Lily how to make pancakes shaped like animals. "I brought lunch," she said, holding up a wicker basket. "Martha sent muffins, and I made sandwiches." The domesticity of the gesture eased some of Ethan's tension. This was familiar territory, the three of them together, sharing simple pleasures. The boat ride to the island passed in comfortable conversation, Lily chattering about the end of the school year, while Sophie listened with genuine interest. Hard Island welcomed them with its natural beauty unmarred by the complications of the mainland. They spent the morning walking familiar beaches, Sophie pointing out tide pools where she had collected shells as a child. Lily waded in the shallows, shrieking with delight when small fish darted around her ankles. After lunch on the beach, Lily spotted the Sullivan children playing near the general store. "Can I go say hi?" she asked, already halfway to her feet. Ethan hesitated, but Sophie nodded encouragingly. "Martha will keep an eye on them. We can see the store from here." As Lily ran toward her new friends, Sophie turned to Ethan. "We can talk properly." He nodded, bracing himself for the difficult conversation ahead. But Sophie surprised him. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," she began, "about not being able to simply transplant you into my world." "You're right. I am." He hadn't expected her to concede so readily. "Completely right." She drew patterns in the sand with her finger, organizing her thoughts. "That's why I'm not asking you to join my world. I'm asking if we can build a new one together." Ethan frowned, uncertain of her meaning. "What does that look like?" Sophie's eyes lit with the passion that emerged whenever she discussed things that truly mattered to her. "It looks like living here on the island, not in the main house if that feels wrong, but maybe the caretaker's cottage by the eastern cove. It's beautiful, smaller, more private." "Sophie, let me finish," she urged. "The training center isn't just a convenient job offer. It's something the island needs, and you're genuinely qualified to develop it. Your military experience, your mechanical skills, those are valuable here." She gestured toward the small village visible from their position on the beach. "This community needs practical expertise more than it needs another person who can read financial statements. You'd be valued for exactly who you are, not who people expect you to be." The proposal was more thoughtful than Ethan had anticipated. "And Lily, what about school, friends?" "The island school goes through 8th grade. It's small but excellent. My parents have made sure of that, and she's already making friends." Sophie nodded toward the store where Lily was now engaged in what appeared to be an intense game of hopscotch with the Sullivan children. "For high school," Sophie continued, "there's a boat that takes the older kids to the mainland every day. Or we could discuss other options when the time comes. The point is, we'd figure it out together." Ethan absorbed her words, surprised by how thoroughly she had considered the practical aspects. "And us? Where do we fit in all this?" Sophie's expression softened. "We start where we are, two people who care deeply about each other, raising a remarkable little girl. The rest," she shrugged, "the rest we build day by day, like any family." "What about hard enterprises? You're the CEO of a major company. You can't just work from the island all the time." "Actually, I can, mostly. My parents managed it. 3 days a week on the mainland for meetings, the rest of the time here." She smiled. "Technology makes the impossible merely inconvenient." For the first time since Sophie's identity was revealed, Ethan felt the stirrings of genuine possibility. Not a fairy tale ending where class differences magically disappeared, but a practical path forward that honored who they were individually and what they had become together. "I'm not asking for an answer today," Sophie said, echoing her words from the previous night. "Just for you to consider that there might be a way forward that doesn't require either of us to become someone we're not." Ethan reached for her hand, entwining their fingers in the warm sand. "I'll consider it, seriously." Relief softened her features. "That's all I ask." They spent the remainder of the day exploring the island with new eyes, not as visitors, but as people contemplating it as home. Sophie showed them the caretaker's cottage she had mentioned, a charming structure with weathered shingles and a view of the cove that stole Ethan's breath. They visited the small building that could become the training center, a former boathouse with ample space for workshops and classrooms. Throughout it all, Lily moved with the freedom of a child discovering paradise, making friends with island children, collecting shells and interesting stones, absorbing the rhythm of a place unlike any she had known before. As afternoon faded toward evening, they found themselves on the bluff near the main house, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. Lily had fallen asleep on a porch swing, exhausted by sun and sea air. "She fits here," Sophie said softly. Ethan couldn't deny it. His daughter had blossomed on the island, her natural curiosity and resilience finding perfect outlet in this place where nature and community intertwined. She does, he agreed. And what about me? Do I fit here too? Sophie turned to him, the dying sunlight catching amber highlights in her hair. You fit with me, she said simply. The rest is geography. The ferry back to the mainland departed at dusk, carrying the day's final visitors. Sophie persuaded them to stay for dinner at the main house, a simple meal they prepared together in the large kitchen. Lily set the table with solemn importance, carefully arranging silverware according to Sophie's gentle instructions. Can we eat outside, she asked, on the big porch with the lights? They carried their plates to the wraparound porch where string lights twinkled against the deepening blue of evening. Below them, the island settled into night rhythms, fishing boats returning to harbor, lamps glowing in cottage windows, the distant sound of music from the general store where some residents gathered most evenings. It's so quiet, Ethan observed. Peaceful. That's what I love most about it, Sophie agreed. Even with everything that happens here, the work, the community activities, there's a fundamental tranquility. After dinner, Lily's eyes began to droop despite her protest that she wasn't tired. Sophie showed them to guest rooms in the east wing of the house, rooms that had once belonged to Sophie's parents. Are you sure? Ethan asked when she led him to the master suite. This was your parents' room. Sophie nodded. It feels right somehow. They would have liked you, Ethan. Very much. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, allowing his fingers to linger against her cheek. I wish I could have known them. In a way you do, through me. She echoed his words about Maria, acknowledging the parallels in their losses. Later, after Lily was settled in the adjacent room, Ethan stood on the private balcony outside the master suite. The night spread before him, stars scattered above, the dark expanse of the sound below, the distant glow of the mainland, land like another world entirely. Sophie joined him, wrapping a light blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. Quite a view, Ethan said. My father used to say it was worth more than any painting in any museum. She leaned against the railing beside him. I'd come out here sometimes after they died, before everything fell apart. It helped me feel connected to them. Ethan understood that need, the search for continued connection after loss. He had sat in Maria's car for hours after her funeral, breathing in the lingering scent of her perfume, desperate to keep some part of her present. I've been thinking about your proposal, he said after a comfortable silence, about building something here, together. Sophie turned to him, careful hope in her eyes. And? I need to be sure it's real, that we're not just clinging to each other because of what we went through together. What we went through revealed who we are, Sophie countered. Crisis doesn't create character, it exposes it. Maybe. Ethan chose his next words carefully. But I need to know that this isn't about gratitude for you or escape for me. I need to know it's about us, who we actually are, not who we needed each other to be. Sophie considered this, respecting the gravity of his concerns. That's fair. How do we prove that to each other? Time, Ethan said simply, not rushing, making sure Lily is truly part of every decision. I can work with that. Sophie moved closer, tentatively leaning her head against his shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. Whatever path we choose together. They stood that way for some time, watching stars emerge above the dark water, the future unwritten but suddenly less frightening for being faced together. The morning brought a decision, not final but a beginning. They would spend weekends on the island through the summer. Ethan would help develop plans for the training center, testing whether the work truly suited his skills and interests. Lily would have time to form genuine friendships with island children, to determine if this place could truly become home. Sophie drove them back to the mainland, and the three of them singing along to radio songs as the coast highway unwound beneath wheels. At Ethan's apartment, she helped carry Lily's backpack inside, lingering in the small living room that had once been her sanctuary. It feels different now, she observed, looking around at the familiar space. Smaller? Ethan asked, expecting her to notice the contrast with the grand estate she now inhabited. No, she shook her head. Just not where we all belong anymore. We've outgrown it. The observation held no judgment, only recognition of their shared journey. This apartment had sheltered them through a crucial chapter, but the story was moving forward. Sophie left with a promise to call the next day, to begin making practical arrangements for their summer plan. At the door, she embraced Lily with fierce affection, then turned to Ethan with a question in her eyes. He answered by drawing her close, kissing her with a certainty that had been building since that first night on his couch. Not a fairy tale ending, but a beginning grounded in reality. The reality of who they were together, what they had survived, what they might build. June stretched into July, summer settling over Connecticut in waves of humid heat. Each weekend found them on Hart Island, gradually transitioning from visitors to inhabitants. Ethan began working with island craftsmen to renovate the boathouse into a training facility, discovering an unexpected talent for design and project management. Lily flourished in the island's freedom, returning each Sunday evening sun-browned and full of stories about tide pools and forest explorations. She formed a particular friendship with Emma Sullivan, Martha's granddaughter, the two girls becoming inseparable despite the brevity of their weekend visits. Sophie divided her time between mainland responsibilities and island rejuvenation. The Hart Foundation took shape under her guidance, attracting support from unexpected quarters. Several board members who had initially viewed her plans with skepticism became advocates after visiting the island and witnessing its potential firsthand. By August, the caretaker's cottage renovation was complete, a collaborative project that engaged the entire island community. Sophie had insisted on preserving its essential character while adding modern comforts that would make it a true home. The result was a perfect blend of tradition and practicality, much like the family they were slowly becoming. On a perfect summer evening, with cicadas singing in the trees and the ocean murmuring against the shore, Sophie presented Ethan and Lily with keys to the cottage. "It's yours," she said simply, "whenever you're ready." Lily accepted her key with reverent hands, immediately running inside to claim the bedroom with the window seat overlooking the cove. Ethan remained on the porch, turning the key over in his palm. "This is really happening, isn't it?" he said, wonder mixing with lingering disbelief. Sophie smiled. "One day at a time, remember? But yes, it's happening." The decision to make the move permanent came not from any dramatic revelation, but from the accumulation of small certainties. The way Lily ran toward the ferry each Friday afternoon, eager to return to the island. The quiet satisfaction Ethan found in work that combined his mechanical skills with a larger purpose. The natural rhythm they had developed as a family, meals shared on the cottage porch, evenings spent playing board games or reading together, weekend explorations of the island's hidden treasures. In late August, Mike Peterson called from the auto shop with unexpected news. He was retiring, selling the business to a national chain. They were offering positions to current employees, but Mike doubted Ethan would be interested. "You've found your place, haven't you?" the older man said gruffly, "on that fancy island with your girl." "I think I have," Ethan admitted, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Good. You deserve it, Cole. All of you do." The call crystallized what had been forming for weeks. There was nothing holding them to Bridgeport now, no GUI, no school year yet begun, no reason to delay the future waiting on Hart Island. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Ethan found Sophie on the main house porch, reviewing foundation documents by lamplight. She looked up as he approached, a question in her eyes. "I'm ready," he said simply. "We're ready to make this home, officially." Joy bloomed across her face, bright and uncomplicated. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure." He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "Not because it's perfect or easy, but because it's right. For all of us." The move happened with little fanfare. Their apartment in Bridgeport had always been sparsely furnished, the accumulation of possessions limited by necessity and frequent relocations during Ethan's military years. What mattered most, Maria's mementos, Lily's treasures, the photographs documenting their life together, fit into a surprisingly small number of boxes. Sophie insisted on helping, arriving with coffee and pastries on moving day, rolling up her sleeves to pack kitchen items and clean empty cabinets. Her willingness to engage in the mundane details of their transition spoke volumes. This wasn't charity or novelty for her, but genuine investment in their shared future. Mrs. Greenberg cried when they said goodbye, pressing homemade cookies into Lily's hands and extracting promises to visit. "You bring that young lady of yours," she told Ethan with a knowing smile. "I want to see for myself that she's taking proper care of you both." The island welcomed them home with a sunset that painted the sky in impossible colors as their ferry approached the harbor. Residents gathered on the dock, a small celebration organized by Martha Sullivan, who declared that new beginnings deserve proper recognition. That night, sleeping in the caretaker's cottage for the first time as permanent residents, Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known since before Maria's illness. The sound of waves against the shore, Lily's soft breathing from her new bedroom, the knowledge that Sophie was just a short walk away in the main house, all of it combined into a sense of rightness, of belonging. September brought the start of the school year. Lily entered third grade at the island's small schoolhouse, one of only 4 students in her class. The individualized attention allowed her to thrive academically, while the close-knit community provided social connections that had been difficult to establish in their transient life before. The training center construction accelerated as fall approached, island residents contributing skills and labor alongside mainland contractors. Sophie's vision expanded as the project progressed, beyond vocational training to include environmental education and sustainable tourism practices that would provide economic opportunities while preserving the island's character. Ethan found unexpected fulfillment in his role, discovering abilities he hadn't known he possessed. His practical experience combined with Sophie's business acumen created a partnership that extended beyond their personal relationship into a shared mission, building something that honored both their pasts while creating a future neither could have imagined alone. Their personal relationship evolved with similar natural progression. Sophie spent increasingly more time at the cottage, her presence so frequent that the boundaries between their separate homes blurred. They moved forward with intentional care, mindful of Lily's adjustment and the public scrutiny that occasionally followed Sophie's choices. In October, exactly 1 year after Sophie had fled her aunt and uncle's control, the FBI located the Whitfields in a small South American country. Their extradition proceedings began immediately, closure approaching for the final chapter of Sophie's ordeal. That evening, they built a bonfire on the beach, the 3 of them, plus Martha and a few close island friends. As flames danced against the darkening sky, Sophie raised a mug of hot cider. "To endings that make new beginnings possible," she said, her eyes finding Ethan's across the fire. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep in her father's arms and been carried home to bed, Sophie and Ethan walked along the moonlit shore. The night was cool but not cold, autumn asserting itself gently in the New England air. "I have something to ask you," Sophie said, her voice carrying a hint of uncharacteristic nervousness. Ethan looked at her curiously. "Anything." She stopped walking, turning to face him with determination in her eyes. "Move into the main house, with me, both of you." The request caught him off guard. "The cottage is perfect, Sophie. We don't need—" "It's not about need," she interrupted gently. "It's about want. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want Lily's laughter filling those empty hallways. I want us to be a family in every way." Ethan considered her words carefully. "The main house has a lot of history for you. Are you sure you want to share that?" "I'm sure I want to make new history there." She took his hands in hers. "My parents built that house for family, for generations of hearts to fill it with life and love. What better way to honor them than to do exactly that?" The sincerity in her voice touched something deep in Ethan's chest. "Have you talked to Lily about this?" Sophie nodded. "She said she'd agree on one condition, that she can bring the window seat from the cottage to her new room." Ethan laughed. "Always negotiating, that one." "I wonder where she gets it from," Sophie teased, moving closer until she stood within the circle of his arms. "From you, obviously. I'm the reasonable one in this relationship." "Is that what this is?" Sophie's voice softened. "A relationship?" Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle against her skin. "It's everything, Sophie. Everything that matters." Their kiss held the promise of the future they were building, not the fairy tale ending of princess rescued or pauper elevated, but the infinitely more valuable reality of 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed to become more fully themselves. The training center opened officially in November, a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by board members, island residents, and a small contingent of press attracted by the unusual story of the heart heiress and her unconventional choices. Sophie stood proudly beside Ethan as he described the programs they had developed together, his natural authority and practical knowledge earning respect from even the most skeptical observers. Lily stole the show by presenting the first official certificate from the center's youth program, a junior environmental steward award she had helped design, complete with a hand-drawn seal featuring the island's iconic lighthouse. As winter settled over Hart Island, transforming it into a different kind of beauty, they moved into the main house. The transition happened gradually, favorite books migrating to new shelves, Lily's artwork appearing on previously formal walls, Ethan's tools finding space in what had once been James Hart's workshop. Sophie watched the transformation with quiet joy, occasionally running her fingers over the places where their lives intersected. Ethan's reading glasses beside her business journals, Lily's school projects spread across an antique table that had previously held only decorative objects. Christmas approached with gathering excitement. Lily threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm, insisting on decorating every room with homemade ornaments and greenery gathered from the island forests. Sophie joined in with equal fervor, resurrecting traditions from her childhood and embracing new ones Ethan and Lily brought with them. On Christmas Eve, snow fell in gentle flakes that transformed the island into a winter wonderland. They gathered in the great room where a massive fir tree reached toward the ceiling, decorated with a charming mixture of Hart family heirlooms and construction paper chains made by Lily's class. "I have something for you," Sophie said, after Lily had finally been persuaded to go to bed, the promise of Santa's arrival eventually overcoming her determination to stay awake. "It's not exactly a Christmas gift, more of a question." She handed Ethan a small velvet box, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time in months. He opened it to find not a ring, as he had momentarily expected, but a key, older, more ornate than the practical house keys they now shared. "What's this for?" he asked, turning it over in his palm. "The future," Sophie replied. "It's the key to the lighthouse keeper's cottage on the North Shore. The lighthouse itself is automated now, but the cottage has been empty for years." She took a deep breath. "I thought we could renovate it together. As our home." Ethan looked up, confusion evident. "But we just moved in here. This house will always be part of Hart Island and part of the legacy my parents built." Sophie's eyes held a new certainty. "But I want us to build something that's just ours. Not the caretaker's cottage. Not my family home. Something we create together from the beginning." The gesture struck Ethan with unexpected force. This final evidence that Sophie truly understood the importance of equality between them, of building a life that honored both their pasts while belonging fully to neither. "What about the main house?" he asked. "It will still be part of our lives, a gathering place for holidays, community events, foundation activities." Her smile held a hint of mischief. "And perhaps someday for a larger family than just the three of us." The implication warmed him from within. "Someday," he agreed, drawing her close. "But for now, yes. Let's build something that's truly ours." They sealed the agreement with a kiss that held all the promise of their journey, from that cold alley where they had first met to this moment of perfect belonging, the circle complete. Spring arrived on Hart Island with an explosion of new life. Wildflowers carpeting the meadows, migratory birds returning to familiar nests, the community emerging from winter's relative isolation with renewed energy. The lighthouse keeper's cottage renovation became a focus of shared purpose. Weekends filled with planning and preliminary work as they prepared for the more substantial construction to begin once the weather fully cooperated. Lily approached her 9th birthday with the confidence of a child who knows she is deeply loved. Her life on the island had transformed her, still Ethan's daughter with Maria's gentle heart, but now also carrying Sophie's influence in her growing independence and curiosity about the world. The three of them built their life together day by day, the ordinary rhythms of family life made extraordinary by the conscious choice and effort that had created them. Breakfast conversations about school projects and foundation initiatives. Evening walks along the shore, collecting interesting shells and stories from the day. Weekend adventures exploring the island's hidden corners. Each discovery shared with equal excitement, regardless of who found it first. On a perfect May afternoon with the lighthouse cottage renovation well underway and the training center thriving under Ethan's guidance, they picnicked on the bluff overlooking the harbor. Lily ran ahead to greet Martha Sullivan, who had appeared on the path with a basket of freshly baked cookies, leaving Ethan and Sophie momentarily alone. "Happy?" Sophie asked, leaning against his shoulder as they watched Lily gesturing animatedly to Martha, something of apparent great importance. Beyond anything I could have imagined, Ethan replied honestly. You? Complete. She turned to face him, the breeze catching her hair in a golden halo around her face. I was thinking about that night we met, how close I came to telling you to go away, how easily we might have missed all of this. Ethan shook his head. I don't think we would have. Some things are just meant to be, one way or another. The mechanic is a romantic at heart, Sophie teased, but her eyes held the same certainty he felt. Who would have guessed? You did, he reminded her. From the beginning. Their kiss was interrupted by Lily's return, her breathless excitement demanding their immediate attention for some discovery she had made near the cliffs. They followed her down the path hand in hand, their separate journeys now permanently intertwined into a single story. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, they stood together on the porch of what would soon be their new home. The lighthouse keeper's cottage was taking shape, walls rebuilt, windows replaced, a structure once abandoned now returning to life through their shared vision. Behind them, Hart Island settled into evening rhythms, lights appearing in cottage windows, boats returning to harbor. The community Sophie had been born to lead, and Ethan had chosen to join moving forward in sustainable harmony. Before them stretched the endless horizon of the sound, the future extending beyond what either could see alone. It's strange, Sophie mused, her voice quiet against the sound of waves. A year ago, I was hiding, afraid of my own name, of the responsibility that came with it. And now, Ethan asked, though he knew the answer in the confident set of her shoulders, the peaceful certainty in her eyes. Now I understand what my parents tried to teach me. That privilege isn't about wealth or status. It's about having the power to make choices that matter, to build something that lasts beyond yourself. Lily appeared in the partially constructed doorway, hair wild from the day's adventures, face aglow with the particular happiness of a child who knows exactly where she belongs. Martha says there's going to be shooting stars tonight. Can we stay up to watch? Sophie smiled, extending her hand to the girl who had become as much her daughter as Ethan's. Of course we can. Some things are worth staying awake for. As night deepened over Hart Island, the three of them sat on blankets spread across new wooden decking, heads tilted toward the vast expanse of stars. Each shooting star drew exclamations of wonder, wishes whispered into the darkness, promises of possibilities yet to unfold. Ethan watched his daughter's face illuminated by starlight, then turned to the woman beside him who had transformed their lives through a simple act of human connection. The night was clear and perfect, the future stretching before them with the same infinite potential as the cosmos above. In that moment, he understood that the greatest treasures weren't islands or inheritances, but the hearts that recognized each other across impossible distances. Sophie had found him when she had nothing material to give, only her true self, vulnerable and real. He had offered shelter without knowing her name or worth, seeing only another human in need of kindness. From that authentic beginning, they had built something neither could have created alone. A family defined not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by the daily decision to see and value each other exactly as they were. As another star streaked across the heavens, Lily's sleepy voice broke the comfortable silence. Do you think Mommy can see us from up there? Ethan pulled his daughter closer, feeling Sophie's hand find his in the darkness. I think she can, he said, certainty warming his voice. And I think she's happy that we found our way home. Sophie's fingers tightened around his, their shared journey complete in all the ways it mattered. Not a fairy tale ending of rescued princess or elevated pauper, but something infinitely more valuable. The authentic connection of hearts that recognized in each other exactly what they needed to become more fully themselves. Under the canopy of stars, with the sound of waves against the shore marking time's passage, they remained together. Three souls bound by choice rather than circumstance, building a future worthy of the kindness that had first brought them together on a cold winter night when one simple act of humanity had changed everything.